We All Worry, Now What? The title of your brand new book.
Yeah.
That is so beautiful and just connects. It's going to connect to so many people and help so many people. And I'm just really excited about it because so many of us, we lose so much of our life to worry, to anxiety, to rumination of thoughts. And I'm excited to dive into some of the lessons and stories in the book. But first, just wanted to ask you, in your own journey, what has led you to writing such a powerful book?
It's, as I say, I've had a life, well lived. And through all of the different milestones, turning points, just moments in my life, anxiety, stress, panic has always sort of sat right on my shoulder. And so I've always navigated, even people go, gosh, with all that you've done, you still deal with, stress and panic disorder. And I go, yeah, I do. And so this book was really, everything for me is about, if I've done all this, you can too. You can, whatever it is that you want to do, and here's how. So it was important to me, especially in a time where we live in a world that's just so riddled with, instability, like stress, worry. And worry, I always say, is the seed that gets watered, that turns into the stress, the anxiety, the panic. And I just thought, this is how I've had a lot of things that have gone on in my life that have really created a lot of worry. I have my black belt in worry, but I also have my black belt in being a warrior. And I wanted to just share some of the tips that have helped me get through. And knowing that it's not like, oh, I figured it all out. Here's all the answers. No, I got to work my program all the time as I'm still living my life and dealing with the challenges as we all have them.
Mm-hmm. Has this been part of your life since childhood? Or when did you really start to be aware of worry? And you've been through a lot.
I've been through a lot. I always say I was born premature. So I was born 3 months early. And I always say I think it was to get a little head start on worry because I lived in the hospital for 3 months before I could even come home. And when I did finally come home, I had a mom that was a little bit overwhelmed and sort of said, but I never really got to bond with you. And I had a lot of medical issues. So I think worry seemed to start kind of really early on. And I was always trying to, whether I was get approval or deal with whatever medical, malady I was dealing with at the time, it was a challenge. So I think it's been something that I was aware of, that anxiety and my view of the world was probably going to be a little bit more challenging.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the things that sort of happened along your journey that maybe you mentioned your mom and not bonding? What were some of the things? Because I think a lot of people are in the infancy of their own journey of realizing, oh, wow, here's what worry or anxiety looks like in my life. And maybe here's where it stemmed from. And then just kind of starting on that journey of wanting to sort of change their relationship if they can with worry and anxiety and panic and all that. I think that one of the most beautiful parts of this moment in time is thankfully people are talking about it and they're sharing it and they're not hiding as much and thinking that they're alone in it. It is something that almost every one of us deals with. And so I think you so courageously talking about it is so powerful. But has it been something that has built and gotten like to a point in your life where then you're like, oh, I have to do something about this? Or?
Well, I think people are talking about it now more so because they're feeling it. People have been feeling worry for so long. Mm-hmm. And, it's just like with mental illness, mental health, like people are now talking about things more that maybe they were silently struggling with.
Yeah.
And for me, I've always been talking about it. It's hard to, when you're living it, you don't really know, especially with anxiety, it's can be free floating. People could go, as they always would go, well, what are you afraid of? Or everything's going great right now. Or why are you stressed out? And we can't always put, a face to it, a name to it, a rationale to it. It's just something that, we walk with. And I think for me, it was early on that mine manifested in feeling like somebody was always going to get me. That sort of unsettling feeling, never feeling quite peaceful, restful. There was always just something that was under the surface that was a little bit more in turmoil. And I think it more manifested for me in personal safety, not feeling safe, or that something was coming down the road for me. And that was a big part of worry for me. And a lot of that was being in a family dynamic where the mom and dad were young. They probably were two people not meant to be with each other. And as a kid, you're picking up all that energy. So that instability feeds into that worry, which then feeds into that stress, anxiety, and a lot of panic disorder.
Mm-hmm. How old were you when it started?
I just remember being I was 5, 6 years old. And I remember my mom at the time going, if you don't calm down, they're going to come in, and I feel bad because I don't want to my mom is a great woman. And I think she was just really at wit's end at time, but it was more her way of saying is if you don't calm down, they're going to put you in the hospital. And you're like, oh my gosh, they're going to put me in the hospital? No. I've got to calm down. And you sort of take all that inward. And so you're not really sure how to navigate it and what to do with that. So I think that was a lot of it is so much of it becomes this internal struggle that you don't really know where to turn to, especially when you're young. So it can manifest in acting out, not staying in school, which for me, I didn't stay in school. I was always finding my way out of I know in those early parent conferences, it was she doesn't stay in the reading circle. She wanders away. I was it's just that always little bit of that stress, trying to figure it out for yourself.
Mm-hmm. And then you talk about personal safety. You had a life-altering incident happen.
I did, and it was life-altering. And I don't know whether it's a premonition or a sense of that foreboding of being at home in our apartment. And it wasn't a house, it was our apartment. And coming home one night and going in my room, and it's that really classic horror scene where you're in your bedroom late at night and you're watching TV and you look up in the mirror and there's somebody standing behind you and you're like, what? With a ski mask and a look like an item with a dish rag hanging over it. And I thought it was my brother, because my family did know that I was so vulnerable and always afraid of somebody to come get me, that I thought, it was my brother playing a joke. And I turn around Mark, and he's like, don't move. And when you hear a voice that is clearly not your brother and one that's saying don't move, you sort of know, wow, this is it. And because at that point I thought, well, I'm the last victim. My bedroom was off the back of the house. And so I figured everybody else was gone and I was it. And that was a very, you sort of go, wow, I'm 17. I'm in my last year of high school. Is this really it? Am I going out like this? And I don't really want to go into all the details of all the bad things that happened to me and my body, but clearly enough to know that I learned about going out of body when something really bad is happening to you, that sense of disassociating, and being also the fact that all I kept thinking about was what's happened to my family? Are they all gone? And so there were so many things that were happening, and he was known as the pillowcase rapist. It was notorious in California. And at the time when I was kept in this really small space, hence I still am claustrophobic, but I was kept in this small space. And when I saw him reach over to grab a pillowcase, I thought, well, maybe he's going to be, putting jewelry and things, not that I had anything, but whatever I have in this pillowcase. But when I realized very quickly that he was about to put it over my head and started, I said to myself, I am going to count to 3. And that feeling you have you're so scared, is something going to actually come out? And I counted to 3 and I knew I was just going to scream at the top of my lungs. And I did. He throws off his ski mask. I can't really identify him, drops it on the floor. My bedroom door would get stuck. He was pulling it to try to get out. I'm completely in shock. And I just ran as fast as I could up the stairs. I was bleeding to see, if my parents were still there and what was happening in my house. I thought I was going to see a very ugly scene in the house. So that was life-changing, absolutely. But I knew during that out-of-body kind of time for me that I was here for a reason, that my life was here for a reason, that this was not going to be how I died. But it was life-changing. I knew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. People who know of you as for so many things, but on the outside, we don't always know what someone's going through on the inside, right? Which I think it's so powerful that you wrote a book being so candid and vulnerable that shares real lessons on how do you navigate worry and panic and anxiety, and also not let it rob you of your freedom and not let it rob you of your joy and not let it rob you of like the life that you want to lead and the impact you want to have. And people that know you know, many know you, of course, for being a pioneer, an icon. Oh my goodness, 40 years ago, no makeup. I remember as someone who started a beauty company and has been in that industry. Let me just brag on my friend for a minute. I remember, I can't even count the number of times where I've seen so many brands and be inspired by what you've created, or even try to do what you've created. All the things, you've been such a pioneer in building women's confidence and helping people feel good about themselves. Trademarking no makeup before anyone else used it. There's a lot of other people, millions of people that know you for your medical. You're a pioneer in the medical space and the research that you've done and the funding and the drugs that have been approved, and which I'll ask you about that in a minute. Women's Hall of Fame. There's so much that people know you for, and this other part of you has coexisted. And I want to call that out because I think there's so many people that are listening and watching this that maybe feel alone in worrying or in anxiety. And so can you sort of take us through, having gone through so much, and how have you navigated all of that while also then deciding I'm going to, become a makeup artist and I'm going to start building this career? You became one of the most successful women of all time, pioneer in television, sold $1 billion in product on television for Victoria Jackson Cosmetics. You've done so much while also having this piece of you.
Right.
And so can you kind of share with us how?
Well, I know it sounds crazy to think, how does that like coexist?
Yeah.
How do you have that level of stress and anxiety and still manage to go out and do it? And it's really about, taking leaps of faith, doing it, even when you're uncomfortable. The running theme that I've had in my life has always been about, oh, if I can do this, you can do it, and here's how. So even in my early career as a makeup artist, the first book, this is my 5th book. The first book I wrote was called Redefining Beauty. It was really the how-to of makeup. And the second one was the why. So everything for me has been really the teaching experience, that even though I couldn't do makeup in the beginning, I was a horrible makeup artist, but I practiced till I could get better. And then, I realized, why does it matter? So Make Up Your Life was really, why does makeup matter? What's the whole reasoning that I came up with, the power of mascara and going to the jails for 20 years and seeing how it really changed people's feelings and thinking about themselves. Even though while I'm in the jails, for example, as I've told you, I'm very claustrophobic. I'm going into the jails going, can we leave the door open? They're like, leave the door open, like the cell door, Victoria. I'm still going there facing my fears of going into the prisons for 20 years, but knowing that I was doing something that was making a difference for so many women. So they've always coexisted for me. So it's just, I just push through. And that's so much about in this book is about that. It's taking the next step, it's facing that.
Mm-hmm. And is part of it making the why behind it bigger than yourself to push through the fear?
And that's, that's easy to say.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you're going to feel that. And sometimes it's just like, it doesn't matter that the why might be bigger. I'm just stuck.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to get you to think about, in one of my books, I wrote, perseverance is where the gods dwell. It's like persevering, like constantly pushing yourself, taking whatever small steps, putting yourself in the room. My kids always love when I go, well, if you're not in the room, you're not in the room. And they're like, what does that even mean, Mom? Like, you're not, it's like you have to show up.
Yeah.
I've always put myself in the room. And then there were times where I had opportunities and I couldn't get in the room. I have stories about, I know you did a wonderful job, an incredible job interviewing Oprah, and she was here. And there were times where I had an opportunity to be on Oprah's show and I couldn't get in the room. My anxiety was too high and I couldn't get in the room.
Will you share that story? Because I know that was sort of like this dream of yours.
Yeah.
And then it actually happened. So you and I both have this in common, that we've sabotaged it for different reasons. But can you share this? Because there's people listening right now too that think like, oh, I've blown it. My ship has sailed. I missed that opportunity. But it's like, oh, no, your whole life is ahead of you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I just remember when everyone was telling me, especially in the world of building a cosmetic company, oh, you're not going to be able to compete with the big major companies. And I was like, oh, no, I'm going to be able to do it. And someday I would picture sitting, across from Oprah, and I would be telling her my story.
Yeah.
So I was visualizing that in my head. And I'm going to be telling Oprah and she's going to be interviewing me and I'm going to be successful. So I always was working to manifest it. And then one day I get the call to go to Chicago, where at the time I wasn't flying. And I was going to go there and be the lead, like woman who'd made it against the odds, my infomercial. And I was like, I can't go. I can't get there. I'm too afraid. And
you were afraid of flying.
I was afraid of flying. Yeah. I was just stuck. And I made up some horrible lie that there was like a sickness or something. It was just bad. And I just beat myself up for so long, for so like years. Like, well, that could have been a turning point and you blew that. And, okay, I didn't get there. And how great later in life, I meet Oprah under different circumstances and have a really nice friendship and a conversation and a lunch. And you just never know how it's all going to work out. You never know. And I spent many years just really not forgiving myself for not being able to do something. So we have to look at and give ourselves some grace sometimes, that even with all these books that we read and these tips and the things we listen to, sometimes you're just going to fall short of the mark for yourself. And for some reason, you're not going to do it. But you know what? It's all going to come back around. And somehow maybe that wasn't meant to be, but something else was. The one thing I know, having gone now, as I say, from mascara to medicine and back, you just don't know what life's going to bring up. Mm-hmm. And you just have to give yourself some space and some grace to navigate it, but not give up. Mm-hmm. Keep putting yourself in that room.
Mm-hmm. And keep going for it.
Worry, I always say, is the seed that gets watered, that turns into the stress, the anxiety, the panic. I've had a life, well lived. And through all of the different milestones, turning points, just moments in my life, anxiety, stress, panic has always sort of sat right on my shoulder.